Everyone is making the switch to the Blaze to make it their source for the truth. Why not make it your source for the truth? Make theblaze.com your homepage for news that the other outlets won't even touch. Subscribe to The Blaze TV at theblaze.com/TV or on Dish Network and get access to original programming like For the Record, the show that exposes what's really going on that the government doesn't want you to know. And Real News, the daily conversation on the topics of the day that matter most. Check out the Blaze Radio Network at theblaze.com/radio. Original shows like Buck Sexton, The Morning Blaze with Doc Thompson, Pat and Stu, and Jay Severin. Or if you need something to hold in your hands, subscribe to the Blaze magazine. So basically, anywhere you need to go, you can take the truth with you by taking the Blaze with you. This is the Blaze. Truth lives here. So just to recap, anywhere you need to go, you can take the truth with you by taking the Blaze with you. Find out all the ways at theblaze.com.
A 7-year-old girl walks away from a private plane crash in Kentucky. The Blaze Radio's Brad James.
The little girl's father was flying the family back to Illinois from Key West, Florida on a private plane when they had engine trouble over Kentucky. The plane went down near Kentucky Lake, leaving behind her dead parents, sister, and cousin. The 7-year-old walked in the dark through thick brush to the home of Larry Wilkins, who spoke to Fox and Friends by phone.
Have to bear in mind this little girl's 7 years old, and she had walked about 3/4 of a mile through very, very rough terrain. She was barefooted. She had one sock left on her foot. She was dressed for the Florida weather. They had come out of Florida, and she said that her mommy and dad were dead.
The 7-year-old was taken by ambulance to a local hospital and treated for non-life-threatening injuries.
Funeral plans now set for former New York Governor Mario Cuomo. The Blaze Radio's Tom Peace.
A service will be held Tuesday at a church on Park Avenue in Manhattan. The former 3-term governor dying New Year's Day of natural causes at the age of 82. His son and current governor Andrew Cuomo ordering flags on all state government buildings to fly at half-staff in honor of his father.
In this week's Republican address, Illinois Congressman Rodney Davis saying he hopes the new Congress and the president can get something done.
If we work together, we have a great opportunity to grow our economy and put our nation on solid footing for a bright future.
Davis also talking about Obamacare.
One problem with the health care law, one of many, is that because of its costs and mandates, small businesses face higher costs and have to hold off on hiring.
Obamacare, one of the items on the agenda when lawmakers return to Capitol Hill. Republicans in the majority in both houses of Congress when the session gavels to order. In the president's weekly address, Vice President Joe Biden urging Americans to sign up for health care coverage under Obamacare. I'm Kay Long with news on the Blaze Radio Network. Truth lives.
High above the Parisi Palace at 2919 East Broadway, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Happy New Year to you and yours out there, and thank you for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. San Francisco, back again, my friend, the days of wine and roses, Cal Jater, Baete, Armando Peraza, Eddie Marshall, Ron Stallings, and the rest of the Mill Valley Gang, which included David, what are their names, Crosby. San Francisco was a beautiful artistic enclave before anybody knew it was great. It was an incubator of Latin funk mixed with psychedelic rock and first-generation blues players like John Lee Hooker. Marin City at the time was filled with the sounds of Wes Montgomery and Bola Sete. My guest today hails from the Bay Area and is a blur of movement and magic. Lightning fast when he is in that trance, the one he found himself in time and again, in his garage, woodshedding for hours, being ready for the live moment in front of audiences at Andre's or the Poppycock or Woodstock. Relentless pursuit for those who chant with Carmelo Garcia and Victor Panteau and Hadley Kalaman. My guest was the drummer for Carlos Santana during the most explosive growth of electronic music in our country's history. Sound expansion, playing seemingly simple patterns in complex polyrhythmic grooves, exploring the thesaurus of scales the way Coltrane used to duke it out with Elvin John. Except this time it was my guest along with Doug Rausch and Michael Carabello with Tom Costner laying it down on B3. He has played on the world stage with the heaviest cats like Neil Schon, Sammy Hagar, and Steve Winwood, challenging gravity with flurries of patterns while still holding it down. He is in the same master drumming discussion as Jack DeJohnette, Billy Cobham, Lenny White, Billy Kreutzmann, Gregorico, and Gaylord Birch. Back when music came out of the community and was supported by the community. Now that community looks somewhat different as we have fully become automatic men in the age of digitization. On this journey, I have used technology to find my heroes in music. Once I have accessed these cats, they provide lessons in leadership, love, life, and lineage. And my guest does it by helping people dance, maybe even the teacher in the classroom, because you want to enjoy the musical ride. Looking to set the rhythm straight in 2015, Michael Shrieve, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you for that incredible introduction, Jake. You're going deep, man.
Deep, man. And I wasn't even that happy with it. I mean, but it is what it is. It's an honor to have you on the program, man. Thank you, man, so much.
You're welcome. But you're referencing that Standard Oil recording that wasn't even put out to the public.
I cannot believe you just. I mean, you're getting out in front of this. Let's just wait on that for a minute, okay? We'll wait on that. You're unbelievable. Let me ask you a question. Can you talk about going with your dad to the Poppycock and seeing music in its original form being dance music?
Well, I think you may be getting a couple of things mixed up there with my dad. I went with my dad, who was a big jazz fan. Mm-hmm. I went up to see Coltrane at the Jazz Workshop in San Francisco. And that was, of course, with Elvin. And that earlier on that day, I had met Elvin and Jimmy Garrison in McCoy Tyner while attempting to sneak into a John Coltrane concert at Stanford University, which was in Palo Alto, which was about, right down the road from Redwood City where I grew up. So the story goes that I ended up sneaking into the men's dressing room, but I did it by coming through the ceiling somehow. And and these guys are like, what the hell is this boy doing? But they were very kind to me, and in fact, so kind that they invited me to go hear them play that night at Jazz Workshop in San Francisco on Broadway. So I must have been really young. I most likely rode my bike to that thing, and then because my father drove me to the show that night, and of course, I couldn't get in because I wasn't 21. But my father had a great night hanging with Elvin and Jimmy Garrison and watching Coltrane, and I was out there like a little dog looking through the window.
They didn't have go ahead, continue.
No, I'm just saying, so if you're referencing a time that I went with my father, that was one of the times when that you might be referring to. Poppycock is another story. Poppycock was also a club in Palo Alto, which was where Stanford was. And I used to play there a lot with different groups. And it's also the same place where Greg Raleigh and I first heard Neil Schon playing years later.
I was going to ask you, I want you to talk about Elvin, because when I've been kind of tripping out on your playing, and there's just so much stuff. But I say, Michael really must have. You must have seen Elvin in person play, and I just want to know what kind of impact he had on you. I know he was just a very warm guy, but on top of that, can you talk about his impact as a young person on your playing?
Well, he loomed large in my lifescape as a young, as a teenager, as learning drums. After a while, I got into drums, and I sort of graduated to a place of Elvin Jones and Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette and all the greats, Papa Joe and Roy Haynes. I graduated in my interests. I graduated. I'm not saying I could play like them, but I began to listen to them more. And Elvin was probably the most monumental. Tony was unbelievable, and he was so young. Jack, I always related to, even before Elvin, and then Elvin. Somebody turned me on to Elvin, and it was a whole nother. That was a whole nother thing. It was kind of. I had a hard time. I could immerse myself in it and feel all of it. It was more difficult to play, except to try to cop a feel of it. And I aspired to be a jazz drummer when I was younger, so that's why these guys were in my world and in my aspirations. But Elvin, we met that first night, and years later we met again, and we became sort of lifelong friends. So I've seen him play many, many times, and he was always monumental. Even getting to know him very well as close family friends, he was still monumental to me. It never got so casual that I, wouldn't have immense respect for him. He was a force of nature.
You just said something interesting there. You were like, it was, wasn't about, a feel, but it was hard to play. When you first heard, do you remember the first, like that Stanford concert? Were they channeling just an hour and a half straight of playing at that point? I mean, I want you to put it, it's just, Michael, it's really important for younger cats, because when I watch you play, the way you play, man, the spirit comes out of you. You don't see that with everybody. It's a spiritual thing, and I know that's. Yeah. And I want you to talk about when you first just talked about to non-musicians too about that electric energy that you felt from Elvin.
Well, Elvin was playing with the rest of the musicians as well, and he was playing with Coltrane while he was at his peak of refinement or his search, his seeking, and they were doing it together. And so Coltrane inspired Elvin to new heights, and vice versa. Elvin definitely inspired Coltrane to new heights, which is why Coltrane wanted and needed him in the band so much. I was going to say desperately, but that's probably the wrong word. But he knew what he wanted, and he needed somebody to kick his ass. and nobody could do it like Elvin. Nobody can just keep going and going and going. And so when I listen to it, I can't figure. People can transcribe that stuff now. And they do, but that is very complicated playing. And so what it became to me, and the same with Jack, was once you start getting into that, it's an energy flow. It's like a river flowing. And I still try to think of whatever style that I'm playing in now. I still try to think of that river flowing, that I want to provide that place that can take people some. Which means you have to go there. You can't expect them to go there if you're not there and transmitting that and coming from that place. Like you say, transmissions for the 21st century. Well, this is transitions for all time. Transmissions for, it's a place beyond, time. But, and I don't mean to get too cosmic here, but that's what I picked up from those guys, that, man, they go to this place like a shaman, and you can't give that to other people, much less the musicians that you're playing with, if you don't go there first.
Oh, it's just already, it's gotten very heavy with Michael Shrieve. Do you remember, I'd like you to talk about your contemporaries as well. I've interviewed Greg Arico. Sure. I haven't had a chance to talk to Billy Kreutzmann yet, but these cats, I just look at you guys, I say, where did these cats, what were they eating? What were their parents feeding them? Why did they get so off on being individualistic players? Like you said, people transcribe that stuff. Talk to your buddy Lenny White. He's like, people transcribe Tony Williams and they think they're playing like Tony Williams, but you got to be yourself. You got to go there. And I want to know the first time in your. Do you remember the first time in a live setting that you went to that place where you went to the source, the highest source, when you lost yourself and went there?
I think I had, shades of it, even playing back with this group that I used to play with. We didn't really have a name, and it was a group that played a lot of different stuff, from Ray Charles to Charles Lloyd. And I remember trying to always learn those grooves like the Ray Charles drummer, like even What I Say,
right.
and the feel of that kind of thing. Like, there's different ways to play that figure. You can drag that cymbal, that bell, like really wanna say, that kind of thing. There's different ways to make it swing, and so you knew getting into it that you had to repeat it over and over again in order to be able to, float down that river. So you had to master a certain amount of technique in order to get rid of the technique to find that place. I remember even Jackie DeJohnette with Charles Lloyd on Stoneflower. That was a tough one, but boy, it really took care of it for me. In that I loved finding that place where you could dance like that. But I also was deep into R&B and James Brown, and that was the same. To me, it was all trance music, And then, of course, I think that the highest part of that stuff for me was the experience with Santana, when that whole machine was just so together, and then the beautiful melodies on top. That was a dance that I found to be much to my liking.
It is so great. I got to read this quote from, I interviewed Lee Oscar last year. He said, I met Michael on campus when he was going to school at San Mateo. I remember being invited into the music class. It was a formal big band group. And then I would see Michael rehearsing like a maniac just by himself in his garage at his parents' house constantly. And, he goes on here to talk about the poppycock. And I mean, he probably got it a little bit confused as well. But I just want, can you talk about your shed growing up? I mean, I've talked to other cats who talked about just woodshedding with drummers, with egg crates all over the garage, hours and hours and hours. And I say, Michael got to he left his physical body. He transcended, but the rudiments have to be there, and you have to be possessed. And I was hoping you could tell the audience a little bit about what your practice woodshed looked like in your garage, if that's where you practiced.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. Lee's got it right, although I remember it differently. But I remember finding him in a church dance in Redwood City, and going, man, who was this guy playing harmonica, and introducing myself. And then he didn't have a place to stay, and I brought him home. And the next morning was Sunday, and he shared Sunday breakfast, which was a big deal in the Shrieve household. And to give thanks, he whipped out his harmonica and played, and we all couldn't believe it, how the sound of that instrument was right when you're sitting there in front of it by somebody like him who could play it. But yeah, I did play in the big band in college and in junior college, San Mateo Junior College, and then I dropped everything else in school except for big band. And I'd get up every morning at 8 a.m. when my parents, I'd start practicing at 8 a.m. just after my parents left. And I would play until 2:30, practice until 2:30, and then I'd go to the big band every day. And then at night, hopefully, I'd play, like at places like the Poppycock or the Nairobi Lounge in East Palo Alto. But I did. I practiced. I practiced hard. Obviously, I even made the hours like a normal person's job.
Sure.
They're going to work. I'm going to work. So, guys around the Bay Area, we're talking about Greg Alico and David Garibaldi and you know, some of the other, Mickey Hart and Billy Krautsman. I used to know Mickey and his father's drum shop in San Carlos, California, and I used to take lessons there from a teacher by the name of Mike DeLuca.
Wow.
And I was blessed with a bunch of really good teachers, and Pete Magadini was one of my early teachers, and he was amazing, and Michael Carvin was one of my teachers, and Anthony Cerrone, a great classical percussionist,
wow.
and a man named Charles Bernstein. So I had some really good teachers, and you combine that with a concerted effort, and you know they can help you move to your goals faster. And plus, once I was able to get around, I was always going to hear music. So yeah, I love it.
You know, it's interesting because I mean it was this can you talk a little bit growing up there? When I talked to Enrico, he said, you know, music was always a beautiful hip scene in San Francisco, even before the explosion of, you know, the 60s. And you said your dad was a big jazz guy. Were you going to see a lot of Cal Tjader and the Latin stuff? When was the first time you got to? I mean, I assume you must have seen Armando Peraza maybe before you even played with him.
You know, I really wasn't into the Latin scene, and I was too young to go to the clubs in San Francisco. Greg Rico, he was a real city boy. You know, like he and Michael Kirabello and Carlos, they grew up in the city. And me, I grew up in the suburbs, so it was a whole different scene. Although there was something going on in Palo Alto, which was a university town. And then with the hippie movement, there was music everywhere. But I wasn't hip to all the jazz guys. I did have a book I studied out of, like a Ted Reed Latin book, which I really enjoyed, and it really helped me. But I hadn't played with any Latin people whatsoever. Before Santana, I was really, I was not at all a Latin player, let's put it that way. So when I got with them, I was just trying to fit into working with, you know, the congas and then later with Chipito. But, you know, I would pick stuff up, but I was never, and still am not at all what you call an authentic Latin player. But I think that's part of what made it. I brought my kind of swing thing into their Latin thing, and it created another thing. There were already Latin jazz things going on, and I had heard Cal Tjader, and I was becoming familiar with Johnny Ray, who was a drummer that played with Cal Tjader. And
absolutely.
He worked at Drum World, which was a drum shop in San Francisco, and I'd go and visit with him there. That was, you know, to me, these were professionals, you know.
Hey, you know, Michael, you know, you made a very good point, because when I watch some of the stuff, the Santana stuff when you first joined, you really have that big band swing, which just fit in perfectly. Although I asked Enrico this because he did some drumming with Carlos too. And can you talk as to a layperson about how to fit in a trap set with all that additional percussion from really talented guys who are playing Afro-Cuban rhythms?
Well, you know, I think like if Greg did some playing, and you know, Carlos has had many drummers. It's you know, you bring your individual thing to it. I mean, frankly, I tried to mesh with it, you know, close my eyes and feel. But I tried to, when I initially came in, I was really trying to stay out of the way, and so I do a lot of hi-hat stuff. If they were doing double time, I'd do double time on the hi-hat. It'd provide also that frequency. And then the bass drum. And it wasn't a little bit later I started, well, first album I did, I was swinging things like like, you know, not quite like that Ray Charles stuff, but yeah, probably big band, you know. And David Garibaldi says the same thing for him. Like, he brought a lot of the big band stuff to Tower of Power. There's nothing like having the experience of playing with a big band where you really have to kick that thing. And I got a lot of opportunity doing that in the big band at San Mateo Junior College with Dick Crest, who was the leader of the band and gave me a really good shot by allowing me in when I was so young. But man, it's different with that Latin stuff. And again, like I'm no expert, and I just tried to fit my way into a weave. You know, it's like a thread, like a weave. Does it hold water? Is it tight enough to hold water, or is it tight enough to, you know, let the people relax, because they subconsciously, they don't have to worry. We got the rhythm, you know. It's like, let go. Okay, relax your shoulders, let go. And that's what we went for. We went for that groove, like just how it felt.
Talking with Michael Shrieve, you got out in front of me a little bit. We have a game on this program called Name That Tune, and I wanted you to take a listen to this and see if you can peg it. I think you will, actually, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay.
60 miles an hour, so that it keeps a steady pace. And it's just like that with drums, where you want to keep it a steady pace, because that's what rhythm is about. To keep it steady and to let it ride that way, so that you have a smooth ride, you know, throughout the music. Start, if you have a feeling that you like to play, is to take your favorite record that you like right now, go out and buy your favorite record, and go buy a pair of drumsticks at the music store, and sit down maybe on a rug, just sit down on the floor and play with the record. And get used to the feeling of playing. Listen to the drummer and get used to the feeling of playing with him, and listen to what he's doing. Just you can even do it in school during the class, you know, but not too loud. Have the song running through your head and keeping a rhythm to it. You know, think about how you would play it. Think about what the drummer is doing.
Feinberg Show is sponsored in part by the Stereo Hospital, with over 40 years of experience repairing all types of home audio equipment, from vintage table radios to digital surround sound, at 4044 East Speedway inside Metronome Music. It's the place to take your turntable, CD player, tape deck, heck, just about anything to do with the stereo. Call 722-4610. Check them out. All right, Mr. Shrieve, what do you got for us?
Man, you're going back into the vaults. I don't even know where you found that one.
Well, let me tell you. I want to tell you the story, because you heard my younger.
There's got to be a story behind it.
There's a great story. Yeah, I mean, again, my younger daughter, you could hear her in the background just screaming because we were cranking that. I was putting her to bed last night. I said, "Oh dear, thank God for George Marsh." You know that name, George Marsh, the drummer?
Oh, sure. I used to take some lessons from George.
George, one of the sweetest guys, and really an angel on this journey. Probably 2 years ago, we did our first interview, and what does he do? He winds up sending me a package of vinyl, including this Pacific gas and oil. I said, boy, I wish the oil companies would do that today. It's like they're making these. He sends me this thing on strings, And he sends me this thing on percussion. And I was getting off on Quasi Badu, Tom Donlinger, Marsh. And then last night I said, wait a minute. Side 3 is all Shrieve. And then I look at the thing and I said, oh, dear. I get to give a shout out to Kevin. And who's on bass? Michael Henderson. Please take us through this story, because I got to tell you, I was like, he's playing with Michael Henderson and Kevin Shrieve. So I was like, please break the story down. And that was you talking over it as well. It was just, I mean, I'm listening to that the rest of, that made 2015 already for me, brother.
Wow. So I'm just on one tune, aren't I? On that thing? It's just one. No, actually, there's. It's crazy because you're just doing that funk groove, and then after that, there's like a 3-minute kind of fusion jam too. I'll send it. I got to get it anyway. Marsh gave me that vinyl, so thank you, George Marsh. It's just basically one long tune, but there's a couple of musical interludes in there. Yeah. I forget how it came about, but I remember doing it, and it was something for Standard Oil, and I happened to be, Michael Henderson was staying at my house in San Francisco. I was working on a solo album, and he was helping me with it, and it never came out. Really? But we did a lot of great stuff, and my brother Kevin was playing on some of it as well, and oh man, we had like Ray Parker Jr. was on it before he was known, and Earl Klug and Patrick Gleason and Sam Morrison, who later played with Miles. Anyway, so Michael, we were really good friends, and so they had these drums down there that were really, I think they weren't mine, and they were really, muted to have that 70s funk sound, like Mike Clark was doing, and so I wanted to play that funk thing. Those drums made me want to play that stuff. And it just seemed like a fun thing to do, is like jam and then talk over it. And I remember when I heard it, somebody turned around to it like 40 years later, and I listened to my voice. I played that thing for my kids, and they didn't even believe that was me talking. I love, dude. Go ahead. To me, when I listen to it, what I love is I'm like, because really, I didn't listen intentionally. I never listened to any interviews with any of my guests. So there's a couple of yours up there. I'm like, I don't even want to hear this guy's voice. I just want to, hit it when we hit it. And then I put this record on. I said, whoa, this guy. You know what I love, man? We're so sped up now in society. Younger generations, we talk so fast. I talk fast, and I'm listening to you. I'm like, this guy's just, and you're playing so fast, but you're talking so slow. It's just so mellow, and the things you're saying. You said play it for your teacher. I bet your teacher will be dancing too. I'm like, put me back. It was before, I was really trying to be like the soundtrack, like just like I listened to my voice and I realized, man, I used to talk like that. I used to talk like this, like Afro Latino dude in the hood, and I'm a white boy from the suburbs. But I mean, I used to hang around with all these people, and you pick it up. And so it's so funny. I'm saying, yeah, man, you just play the groove now. Just sit there. It's just like, okay, now when it goes up, you go to the cymbal, you pick it up a little bit. Now, when you're on the freeway and you're driving and you go into third or fourth gear, you don't be downshifting. Never. The whole thing was crap. I listened to it about, it's part of. I only have about 70 records in my collection. I really keep it pretty lean. And last night it dawned on me. I said, "My God!" I'm like, he is on side 3. I finally figured, and then to listen to it. I mean, to be fair, I had not listened to it before, and I'm like, Kevin Shrieve is playing the wah guitar. I'm like, this was the funkiest thing. And then Michael Henderson was staying at your house. Unbelievable. I mean, listen, if that thing ever gets released, I want to write the liner notes for that. Right? I want to get the liner notes out for that album if it ever comes out. Yeah, man. I mean, I think I have it out there in storage, and I have a digital copy of it as well. I know that thing was sampled by a big British electronic artist about 10 years back, and because somebody told me about it. And it had my voice in it and everything, And I thought, that is so cool. And it just brought back the memories of me having to, reconsider the way I talked. Well, no, you sound actually, thankfully, I was like, you sound just as good today. I mean, it was,
But can you, we were connected through a cat named Lenny White, and I was hoping that you could spend a little bit of time talking about. I've been transcribing a lot of my interviews, Michael, as you know, and Lenny kind of said something profound in the sense that I'm not trying to go back in a time machine, but the true sense
That's okay.
The true sense is that the music came out of these communities, and people, because you had this opportunity to play consecutively for many nights, 7-10 nights, people could get to know the musicians and really get off on it, and guys were playing their butts off. So, I wanted, Lenny talked about being in Azteca, and then he wound up with Return to Forever, and I know you were with Santana, but I wanted you to talk about when you first got together with Lenny, and the kind of different side splinter things that were going on with Shrieve, aside from Santana, because it was just bubbling at that time, 73 roughly.
Yeah, there's so much going on. Well, I was a big fan of Lenny's before I knew him from Freddie Hubbard's Red Clay, and that record was so cool, just the backbeat and the sound of the way. But, here's what it was. It's like Lenny was a jazz player, but he was a young guy. We were kind of the same age. But he was a serious jazz player. But like many of us, he was young and listening to the music that was, on the radio and all around kids his age. So the way he and Tony and Jack DeJohnette played funk beats was really interesting to me. I remember going to see Freddie at the Both End Club with Lenny, and I'm not sure if it was Stanley Clarke or Alex Blake, but I recorded them all. I gave Lenny about 6 CDs of cassettes that I digitized from gigs that he did way back in the day before we were even friends, I think, just a couple of years ago. And Lenny, it was so cool. We were doing Santana, and he was into Santana. He was into we could talk about all kinds of music, like all the jazz stuff, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and other funky stuff. And I remember one day he came over to my house, and he brought this new guitar player, just this kid fresh out of Berkeley that was playing with Return to Forever, and his name was Al Diniola. He was just really young and shy. And Stanley and Lenny, I knew these guys because they were really making waves as the young jazz phenoms, and they were very close friends, and they kind of grew up together. And so man, the scene in San Francisco, Lenny was really into it. Although he was a New Yorker, he was always there, and he loved the activity of the music scene because it was different than the New York jazz scene. It was a lot of fresh stuff going on with like Sly and Greg Rico killing it, and David Garibaldi and Tower of Power, and then Gaylord Birch and all this serious funk stuff as well.
It's just unbelievable. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know, man. Oakland stuff was really killing it. And it was funny because there was all these different scenes. I had a discussion with David Garibaldi. In fact, I'm gonna send this to you. And we're talking about the Bay Area in that time and how there were a lot of different scenes going on. There was the rock scene in San Francisco, the psychedelic scene with the Airplane and the Dead and Janice and Big Brother, and then there was the Oakland scene, which was like a funk thing and a jazz thing. And then there was the jazz thing in San Francisco, and then there was the scene on Broadway, which was like where Sly started, like backing up Carol Doda and being a DJ on the radio, and also where Jazz Workshop was. There was a Bay Area scene down the South Bay, which I was a part of. A lot of rock and roll, and everything was just happening, And the Fillmore was going on, and man, you'd go see Cream and Charles Lloyd and B.B. King and, you name it. It was just unbelievable. Of course, later you realize, you just think this is life, but then later you realize damn, man, there was a lot of shit going on there, beautiful stuff going on, you know?
You know, I mean, that's such an interesting point. I mean, you've really become very involved with electronic music, and do you look back? I think you just answered the question, but it's kind of like I wonder about you cats. Garibaldi, I've done 2 interviews. I love that cat, and Mike Clark, Paul Jackson. The rhythm sections were just pulsating, and now we are here in today's world where, okay, you have a Monday night gig in Seattle, 1 night a week, I believe. A lot of international travel, a lot of overhead costs. And do you look back on that time and say, was that really even real? I mean, for someone like me who was born in 78, coming out of it and almost seeing these flyover towns now like Austin and Tucson, where I live right now, sort of becoming this sort of those new bubbling in their own way, their new energies, as opposed to those urban centers that were just flourishing. Do you look back and say, do you pinch yourself sometimes? Because, man, it was, I mean, for me as a journalist to be able to chronicle this stuff, I'm marinating in it, Michael, and you lived it. And I'm just wondering about how you feel looking back on that time, because, like, you know, you had your hand in about 9 cookie jars.
Yeah, you know, I've always been the guy that never looked back, but I must admit in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been, mainly because people asking me, or, you know, you realize that there's certain things that you've been involved with that had an impact on people. It's not so much you think of yourself like that, but you realize, yeah, this stuff was really happening, and you know, it's different now. I just read last night that quote from Lenny about the communities. That was a really beautiful thing that he said.
Yes.
I think it was different. I think it was different back there where he was. Maybe I know that I would have gigs that would be. I never had like a week gig. That's really great, man. When you think about that, that's where the great players came up, because they did have the opportunity to play like a week at a time in a single place. And I guess groups do that now. Like here at Jazz Hour, there's people go 2, 3 nights, and sometimes even 4, like Tower or somebody who sells it out. But that's where the good stuff comes from. It's a different scene now, that's for sure. It's a whole different business as well, and so you just have to make the shit up yourself. You just got to figure out a way, but it's very difficult, you know. But I think there's no less of some really great music going on. I think there's some really nice stuff going on. There's great drummers, and there's interesting stuff from all over the world. And my tastes are very eclectic too. So,
well, we've barely scratched. I mean, I knew that this is only part 1 with Michael Shrieve at this point. I mean, Michael, I love you. Just be careful of cursing on the radio. We're live now, so I'm sorry. It's all right. No. It's all good. I want to read you something here from Enrico. He said there was a little jazz club on Broadway called Andre's where we would all go and jam. Santana would come down. That's where I met Hadley, who was playing with Louis Gasca. We did after hours there, and if you were coming off the road, there would be a place to go and unwind. Some nights we would have some pretty interesting lineups on that stage. Victor Pantoa would come down. I met Neil Schon there. And I guess that's more to the point, is that the music was amazing, but if you really look at it, Sly Stone, Carlos Santana, Jerry Garcia, Yorma Cow, I mean, the list goes on and on. Leaders came out of that. Real, authentic, powerful leaders with amazing accompanyists. That's what is so intriguing to me today. And again, the scene has changed. The marketing has changed. I just love the leadership. And I love the way it was a life divine. We played that at the beginning of the show. And to me, it was about channeling. You know, everyone was going to make some money off of it. But these guys were channeling their heroes. Going back to Elvin, Train, Miles. Those guys were channeling, or it could have been Bill Monroe, whoever. But they were channeling people. It wasn't about the almighty dollar. I think that's what was most scintillating to me. But did you come off the road with Santana and head down to Andre's with would you wind up on stage with about 15 conga drums up there?
Oh yeah, I would be there all the time. I mean, that's another thing Garibaldi and I talked about when we had the discussion. It was kind of crazy. I mean, it was I think Luis Gasca was putting a lot of that stuff together, and but it became a place where people could hang out. There was another place, too, right in that time, and right in that neighborhood. Oh, man, I'm forgetting the name. I'm terrible with some of this stuff. But Larry Graham had his new band, and they were playing, and the funk was really getting heavy at that time.
This is great.
Yeah,
it'll come to you. Let's do name that tune. I got another tune here. I'm really interested. I think you'll get this one too, but we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Yeah.
Show sponsored by the Amity Foundation, Circle Tree Ranch since 1981, an internationally acclaimed, dynamic, and innovative teaching community engaged in human services, social, and environmental justice. All right, Mr. Shrieve, what do you got?
Well, I didn't know what that was for a while. It was so unrecognizable. Then the vocals came in. It's hard to hear. I'm on a cell phone, but I suspect it might have been the David Crosby record.
If I could only remember my name, and that was the name of that tune was what are their names? What are the names?
Yeah. It's really hard to hear, but yeah, that was. I remember doing that.
You were given partial credit on crafting that song. I mean, what's interesting about that album is that it appears to be the Mill Valley Gang, and I was just hoping that you could spend a little bit of time. Crosby everyone lived out in Marin County. I mean, can you paint the picture where you were at? Because that album, when I look on the inside gatefold, there's about 24 people, and they're all in that pocket, and you're in there. So, and I'm just so on.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, David Crosby knows everybody, and I think this was his first solo album, and he was the guy. He was like the L.A. guy with from the L.A. scene, which was. There was some dichotomy between the San Francisco scene and the L.A. scene. We always looked at the L.A. scene as a little bit like old business, like, little plastic. And for us, like pure snobs in the Bay Area, which was not true. I mean, now I've really I've really come to. There's so many things that I used to kind of put down and be snobby about that I've come to embrace myself. But I think that's all part of defining yourself when you're really young. Crosby asked me to play, as he asked a lot of people, as you can see. And a lot of those people were people from L.A., like Joni Mitchell as well. Neil Young, was now living up in the Bay Area, but not in Marin. Crosby had a boat in Marin, and we became good friends. We became friends enough that, he'd come over and we'd hang out and we'd talk about, Dylan Thomas and world events and stuff like that. And I see him every once in a while now. But when I listened to that record, which I listened to recently, somebody sent me a whole album of outtakes, and I'm not really thrilled by it. I'm not really thrilled with my playing. I never really gelled with that kind of hippie jam thing so much, I don't like the way I sound. And prior to being in Santana, there was a possibility I was going to play with Jefferson Airplane. And my first airplane ride was with Yorma Kalkinen and Jack Cassidy, and actually Buddy Miles was on that same flight. And I went to L.A., and they were recording Bathing at Baxter's. And, again, David Crosby comes to the studio and brings a song called Triad. And this is before I knew David. I was only, 17 probably. So, we used to jam. I used to play with the Airplane, and I don't know how they got to know me because this was before Santana. But when I listened to it, there's a certain kind of playing that when I fit myself into that scene, I don't really sound so good to me, or it's not necessarily me it's the whole combination. That's why the Santana combination was really more right for me and more perfect. But the scene, Paul Kantner and but they had their place on Folsom Street in San Francisco. Michael Bloomfield was also part of that Mill Valley thing, and there's a recording somewhere around called Mill Valley Gang, and it's Bloomfield and myself and a whole bunch of other people, Nick Gravenides, and
it's called Casting Pearls. Yeah,
and I don't know. It's kind of some of the stuff is stuff that should never be released, but there you go.
How much? I mean, I'm always curious because I actually, I think that you're not. It's not like the rapids, the water, the fluidity that you were talking about before, necessarily with your drumming with Santana. But I really like it. It's a little bit more sparse. I just like the characters, and to me, I'm just trying to figure out on that. If I could only remember my name, how many tracks did you play drums on?
Well, I can remember my name, but I don't remember how many tracks.
No, you know what Garibaldi said about what Garibaldi said about L.A. when he moved to L.A. in the mid '80s. He said he had the only live band there. I mean, L.A. there is a drastically different. I know what you're saying. I mean, you've evolved over time, but L.A. is more cutthroat, and the Bay Area was just wide open. And to me, well, it's just. We got about 4 minutes, Michael, before we wrap up here, and I wanted to ask you. Most of Woodstock is chronicled as this muddy mess of weather and electrical shocks and just sort of a ragtime situation, and yet the skies cleared on this day for you, and I really wanted to just ask you about just that experience and the idea of saying, when you look back on that, and you can talk about just playing, because I mean that you hit it at that point. To me, I mean you nailed it at 19, and there are cats that are still looking to try to nail it. And I just wanted you to talk about how you feel about looking back on that time, because the weather actually held up for your drum solo.
It was a moment, and it was captured. That's the thing. I mean, we were playing pretty intensely every night. We were pretty intense, and it's just. I mean, I've got. To me, there are better recordings about film of me playing drum solos that exist, but it doesn't matter. It's that means so much to so many people. And yes, we were there. We were young, and we were intense, and we didn't even have a record out, so people weren't familiar with any of the music. And so when we won them over just by the power of that moment and us being together right there so powerfully. And it was filmed, so we didn't think much of it, although we knew we got over. We knew that. But until the film came out and catapulted us, into international fame just from that one piece, it was kind of another day at the office, not really, of course. And so really what's most impactful for all of us, I think, is that the effect that it still has on people today. It's not so much that we live back there. I certainly don't. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing that it's had such a lasting impact on people. And for that, I used to fight that all the time and say, man, I've done other stuff since Woodstock. But now I'm older and wiser, and I'm grateful that I was able to do something that meant so much, seemingly, to so many people.
Well, listen, Mr. Shrieve, I really enjoyed it. I hope we can set up a time to do part 2. There's a lot more to do. Happy New Year, man.
Anytime.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Jake. All right, peace.
Thank you.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Happy New Year. We'll be back same time next week. Bye-bye.
Southern Arizona's official station of the Arizona Cardinals. Power Talk 1210. KEVT AM Sahuarita, Tucson.